Hello and welcome to episode number 61 of the Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And today we're doing our draft preview extravaganza. This is going to be a very exciting episode. We are going to give our first round mock draft of the upcoming draft, which is a week from recording. That's on January 12th. Just like last year, we're going to pick the entire first round, talk about some names who could go in the second round, and then talk about all the big storylines as well. This year, number one, a little bit more up in the air than last year, although we kind of got a great idea as to who it's going to be. But it is still up in the air, definitely. And a lot of the picks really are, and a lot of picks could be on the move. We're going to talk about it all. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I think, like you said, unlike last year's draft, there's not really consensus number one. And I think there's a lot of interesting kind of guys who are all kind of in very similar tiers. So I'll be curious to see how close our predictions are to the actual thing, but I'm definitely anticipating some surprises.
Last year, I remember we were very wrong. So maybe we'll get proven wrong again.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm reasonably confident that the 12 names that we're going to say we're mocking in the first round are the 12 names that end up being picked in the first round. But I'm not super confident in the order, even starting with number one. And I think it's a good segue into announcing our first overall pick. Would you like to do the honors, Cam?
Yeah, so Yuki has the first overall pick, and we think that he's going to take Marcelo Meyer, the shortstop. And I think, basically he was drafted by the Red Sox this past year. I think he's the best prospect available. Most lists seem to agree. So I think I trust Yuki to take the best player available, but you think there may be some competition for number one.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Meyer is the best player. I've seen some comps to Dansby Swanson. I don't know if Meyer necessarily has the highest upside of all the shortstops in this group. I think you can make arguments for some of the others, but I do think he has the safest floor. I do think Jordan Lawler might be an option for Yuki. I have heard, some people in the industry suggest that Lawler is kind of in the tier with Meyer. But I think the real reason I think Yuki might take him is because Lawler's a Diamondback, and Yuki is a Diamondback fan. As much as it may seem that he is a Tampa Bay Rays fan first and foremost. But if he takes Lawler at one, I think that kind of creates a little bit of a chain reaction that would probably affect the first 3 to 4 picks, which I think, we'll get into a bit later as we lay out our mock. But I don't know, when Cam and I kind of came together to put this mock together, I personally thought that Lawler was going to go number one, although I think we ended up agreeing with Meyer because I think Meyer is the better player. I'm just not 100% convinced that Yuki is going to take the best player available. We've seen some precedents for this when Connor took, Nick Madrigal over Adley Rutschman, was it? Or Nick Madrigal over Casey Mize and Joey Bart, who at the time were both better prospects. So just something to keep an eye out on. But for now, we're mocking Meyer at one to Yuki.
Yeah, and he did take Andrew Vaughn over Adley Rutschman, who was widely considered to be the better prospect as well.
Oh, man. Yeah, that hurts.
Let's see. And then you wonder why we picked Connor to take Garrett Crochet last year, but that did not come true.
Yeah, he traded away that pick. That was our biggest mistake last year. We mocked Crochet at 4. Crochet ended up going at 18 and then was cut in the offseason. So
yeah, that did not turn out right. But another name that could go number one is Henry Davis. I want to touch on him briefly. We know Yuki likes catchers. And also, Henry Davis was the number one pick in the Major League Draft. He wasn't the consensus best player available or anything, but he was taken first. And it certainly wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world for him to go number one. Do you think it's a distinct possibility?
I mean, if he told me like a player that was not named Meyer or Lawler was going to go number one, just given Yuki's love for catchers, I might say it's Henry Davis. But like, I also think that Yuki is actively trying to get rid of catchers to some degree. I know he's put Gabriel Moreno on the block. Now, whether people actually think he's going to be moved is a whole nother question. I have a hard time believing Yuki is going to add another catcher to this farm system, especially when there's a Diamondback top prospect available and there are other prospects that might fit his needs a bit better. But Yuki's proven me wrong before with some of his moves. So, no, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Davis.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. So those are probably the three people we think could go first. But number two, this is Andrew's pick, and we're both in agreement as to who this will be because we've spoken with Andrew, and he said this is who he likes, and that is Jack Leiter, the starting pitcher for the Rangers.
Yeah, I was honestly a little surprised to hear him say that. Like, I think Leiter is definitely a good pitcher, don't get me wrong, but I'm usually kind of the mindset that like I'd rather have a hitting prospect rather than a pitching prospect just because of how much riskier some of these pitching prospects are. And
when it comes to the draft, the answer to the age-old question is the hitter.
Yes.
Not the
pitcher. It's always the hitter. Also, like not Yuki. Andrew has 12 pitchers already in his farm system. Now, some of them aren't like the best, but like he does have like Nick Lodolo and Reed Detmers. Matt Allen's gotten some hype. You know, Hunter Brown he acquired. Bobby Miller's gotten some hype as well. Jordan Balazovic. So it's not like it's a bad group of starting pitchers. And I wonder if he might be better served going with a position player instead. But Andrew really seems to like Leiter, and I don't have a reason to think he's not going to take Leiter.
Yeah, I do worry about, I guess, teams trying to build a rotation first, or trying to build with young pitchers, pitching prospects, because really that does not often work. I guess maybe the Marlins are a little bit of an exception, but they're not exactly winning. But I've seen the Braves have several pitchers bust, and only when they tried to build up through the hitters, that's when the pitching came. And I've seen the Reds trade for a whole bunch of pitching prospects and have every last one of them, except for one or two, completely flop. So, it's just so risky. I tend to avoid pitching prospects for the most part, unless they're like a big can't miss guy, or I'm, I guess, banking at the back end of my farm system. But on the other hand, I was kind of a little bit hoping Leiter would fall to me just so I could have a second blue chip guy there. But we think Andrew is going to take him at 2.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think if you're looking through the league and kind of where some of these teams have acquired their young starting pitchers, it's not often through a guy that they have drafted and like developed, like, or like had through the minor leagues. Like, for example, Eric or Corbin Burns. Corbin Burns was a free agent pickup after he was cut because he struggled at first. Pablo Lopez jumped around between a couple teams. Sandy Alcantara has jumped around between a couple teams. Maybe he was cut at one point. Trevor Rogers is a 40th round pick who definitely did not land on Anthony's team by him drafting him. So I think that going through and just drafting a bunch of these young pitchers is not necessarily the most prudent strategy. I mean, on the flip side, a lot of these hitter prospects have come up through somebody's farm, and more often than not stick. So I think you're very right there.
Absolutely. And pitcher prospects, you can't have a ton of patience for them. There's not really a ton of room for that. And you see these guys like Matt Manning or Tarek Skubal who are kind of stuck on a roster now. So it's a little tough. And even if you do have faith in these guys.
Yeah, it's I think maybe you could pick one or two guys. Like, I think you're a great example of like Grayson Rodriguez is like your guy. He's been your guy all along, and it's starting to pay dividends. But like 9 times out of 10, that just doesn't happen. So
right. Meanwhile, my most promising young pitcher, Shane McClanahan, was someone I picked up as a prospect from free agency.
Right, exactly. So maybe Leiter works out. I mean, I think Leiter is probably one of the better pitching prospects. I think he might be like a number 2 starter in the majors, but there's still a lot of risk. So we'll see how that works out. But I mean, I think we both are kind of at a consensus here that Andrew is going to take Leiter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking back, the 2019 draft, the first starter taken was Casey Mize. He's no longer on Zenimax's team. The second starter taken was Brady Singer. He's kind of been a liability this past year. He's no longer on Connor's team. I really tried to trade for him last offseason. Skipping over Yusei Kikuchi. The fourth one taken was Matthew Liberator, who's bounced around quite a bit. And then after that, it's really Cole Winn has bounced around, and I believe he's currently off a roster. Durbin Feltman was taken because he's got a funny name. So really, there is not much track record when it comes to this.
Interestingly, when you look at the third round of that draft, that might have been one of the more successful rounds for pitchers. Ryan Weathers has debuted in the majors. Logan Gilbert's looked really good. Shane McClanahan with the last pick.
But McClanahan was cut.
But McClanahan was cut. Gilbert, I'm pretty sure, was cut at some point. I
can't imagine he was cut.
Maybe traded, but like 30th overall pick and 36th overall pick. Right. The second overall pick in that draft was Mize, and I think if you ask somebody right now would they rather have McClanahan, Gilbert, or Mize, they might rank it McClanahan, Gilbert, then Mize.
I think you might be right.
If you're looking at 2020, I mean, Nick Lodolo was the first pitcher off the board, but then Alek Manoah was the next pitcher.
Yeah, so Manoah's looking like the best pick out of these. He's debuted with Anthony's team, so he's really kind of been the exception to this all.
Yeah, but there's always a couple. I mean, but like if you look at the guys after that, Shun Yamaguchi, Matthew Allen, Jackson Rutledge, Tommy Henry, Brennan Malone. That's not an aspiring list, but if you look 33rd overall, I picked Daniel Espino and then subsequently traded him to Eric, but he's better than pretty much everybody I just named but Manoah. And, the jury's still out on last year. Asa Lacy was the second pitcher picked, and he was terrible last year. So just who knows?
Who knows? We've talked about this to death. I am picking third. And why don't you talk about who I'm going to pick since I'll stay out of this?
Yeah, with the third overall pick, we believe that Cam is going to take Khalil Watson. Now, it's interesting because I think there are 4 shortstops that are kind of in a group at the top, and I think you can debate how they're ranked. I think pretty much everybody is Meyer at 1, although I know there are some detractors. But between Watson, Lawler, and Brady House, I think that there's kind of a debate. I think Watson might have the highest ceiling of the group. It was interesting that he slipped to the Marlins at 16. I'm not really sure why that was the case. I'm a little surprised the Orioles didn't hop on him at number 5. But I think he'd be a great addition to your farm system. If you're looking kind of at infielders in your farm system, you have below double A, it's really just Anthony Volpe. And he's in high A. So kind of getting someone a little lower there, I think would be beneficial to your farm depth. And you do have quite a few infielders kind of sitting in triple A right now. So once they're kind of flushed out of the system, kind of having some more of that infield depth would be good. I just think this would be a really solid pick for you. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much of my hand, I guess. What should I say about this? I'll say that we're Lawler to go 1 and Leiter to go 2. Then I would take Meyer 3 instead of Watson. I don't know. I think I certainly think Watson's a great prospect. I think he fell that far mostly because of signability reasons. But either way, I would be more than happy to have him on my team.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter what, you have the opportunity to get a really good shortstop. And who knows, maybe Leiter's still there for some reason and you're able to snag Leiter. Maybe that gives you a more difficult decision. But I think you're sitting pretty at number 3 with the number of options that you have. I think the only player that kind of I feel like is in that top tier who I don't think you would take is Henry Davis, and not because I think Henry Davis is a bad player. It's just you arguably have the top 2 catching prospects, and you definitely have the best catching prospect. So he doesn't really feel like the need.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, because at some point it's best player available, but I kind of have the luxury of having there be a lot of great players available. If at my 12th pick, somehow Henry Davis were still available, I would certainly not pass on him. But yeah, I think I kind of have the luxury of not having to worry about a catcher in my farm.
Absolutely. Must be a very nice luxury indeed. But let's move on to the 4th pick here. Greg, Daniel, and Alex own that pick. And we believe that they're going to take Jordan Lawler.
Yeah, that's this is one that we always have a little difficulty knowing what's on their mind, trying to figure out what they're going to do. This is Greg's first draft as a co-owner. In the past, this team has taken some good players. They took Austin Martin last year at 2. They took Nick Lodolo at 8, which was probably a very good pick. So I don't know. They also took Trevor Larnach at 5, who I don't think I remember liking that pick at the time. But either way, Greg is probably going to have a say in this pick, even if it is. Although now that I think about it, he's probably going to defer to Daniel.
Yeah, 100% will.
Yeah, so that wouldn't matter. We decided on Jordan Lawler because he's the best player available at this point, and I think Daniel knows enough about minor leaguers and about prospects and about the game to not take someone off board, at least not someone drastically off board.
I agree. I mean, I do think that I wouldn't be surprised if he goes with Henry Davis or if he prefers Brady House over Lawler, assuming Meyer and Watson are gone. And I do also think, though, that one wild card pick here for them could be where Seiya Suzuki lands, only because I know Daniel's been looking for another major league outfielder all off season. He's been trying to shop a bit towards the top of that market. And Suzuki has kind of that top of the market upside, and he is only 27. Now, there is a question of whether Suzuki is going to actually come out and play in the majors. I've been hearing some rumblings that kind of with some of the uncertainty with the CBA, I don't even think they have a meeting scheduled yet, which is a little cause for concern. And with the KBO spring training kind of approaching in a month, he might opt to stay over in Asia for another year before coming out. But we'll see. Oh, sorry, he's in Japan. He's on the KBO. He's in Japan, but I don't know if they're going to want to then risk that pick. And maybe we have a little more information closer to the draft, but I think he's somebody to watch out for.
I think so. Suzuki is an interesting player. We'll talk about him later today. Number 5 is Alex and Zach making the first of their 2 consecutive picks. And we have them taking Henry Davis, the catcher, for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah. Do we want to announce their 6th pick too and kind of talk about these in conjunction?
Yeah, let's do that. So we picked them to have Brady House at 6. So Davis and House back to back.
Yeah. I think they're in a very enviable position because there are kind of 6 to 7 top flight guys. And I think that at 5 and 6, they'll literally just take who's left. I think Henry Davis is a very legitimate catcher prospect, very legitimate bat. I think it would play whether he's at catcher or at another position, best college bat. I think he's just a very solid pick all around. I think he's definitely safer than Brady House, who I think you could argue has more upside than Meyer, Watson, and Lawler at shortstop. But I think there's also a lot of risk with his game. But I know Alex has really talked about wanting to get one of the young shortstops in this draft on his team. And I think House, they're kind of given that Meyer, Watson, and Lawler are all gone in our mock, would probably be the right pick there. I don't see a ton of controversy with this. I mean, maybe you could be like, hey, Alex likes the Tigers, Jackson Jobe, but Alex doesn't really like Jackson Jobe from what we're hearing. I don't know if they're going to want to dip into the Saya Suzuki pool either, given that they were kind of burned a little bit on Ha-Seong Kim last year and they're still rostering him. But, you know, I think there's a possibility because they, like Greg Daniel and Alex, are also looking for a little bit more offensive juice in the majors. Although I think they're more looking towards the infield, whereas Greg and Daniel and Alex are kind of looking more towards the outfield, making Suzuki more of a positional fit. So those are my thoughts there. What are you thinking about these picks?
Yeah, so I think Davis is the best player available at 5. He's probably an easy pick there. They do have Luis Campusano already in their minor leagues. But, you know, I don't think that's preventing them from taking another catcher. On Brady House, we know that Alex wants one of the top shortstops. He's, in my opinion, the worst of those 4. The worst of those 4 shortstops who were draft eligible this year. But I still think he's got a high ceiling and everything. And I think we've talked a lot about a top 6 plus Suzuki, but really, I think the more I look, the more I think that line is kind of blurry with House kind of at the back of it. And then maybe Colton Cowser, Jackson Jobe kind of pushing into that top 6 or so. So it is maybe a little murky and less clear cut than I was thinking it was a month ago.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think it's totally clear cut. And I wouldn't be surprised maybe if one of the guys that we're going to discuss later in the first round sneaks into like a top 6 to 8. But I'm also kind of willing to more or less bet that people are going to kind of maybe make some picks kind of predicting what other teams are going to do and then kind of picking accordingly. So like, I think Alex is a prime example where he has a pick again at number 9. If he really wants Cowser and he also wants one of the top shortstop prospects, I think he might think it's more likely that Cowser slips to 9 than House. Which I would agree with, and therefore maybe a guy like a Cowser or Montgomery, whoever, you know, kind of slips a bit later, and then they kind of get taken there. but it's hard to tell. And everybody has different internal rankings. And, as we've already kind of gathered, we've learned a little facts about some of these teams and who they like Angel really liking Lighter, Alex and Zach really liking Joe, or not really liking Joe. So it's just, it's hard to predict. But if I had to guess, I would say that the guys we picked in the top 6 will be picked in the top 6.
I think you're right, unless someone surprises with taking Suzuki a little earlier. Either Daniel and Greg, or maybe me, for example, or I don't know.
See, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes earlier. And in fact, I think I might have predicted him earlier had there been a little more stability, or a little more kind of an idea of A, is he going to sign, and B, when's the lockout going to end? But I feel like I'm pushing him down my board because of that. And I do feel like there are a couple teams who are able to take on that risk. Actually, why don't we dive into Suzuki a little more here, and let's do that in conjunction with Eric's picks, because we are mocking with the 7th overall pick Saya Suzuki to Eric, and then with the 8th overall pick, which Eric also has, we think he gets Jackson Jobe. Now, Eric has announced the policy for Suzuki that we voted on, which is if a team drafts him and he doesn't sign with a major league team, the team who drafts him will get a compensatory pick next year, which will be the one pick lower than the pick they had this year. So, for example, if Eric picks Suzuki 7th overall, he will get the 8th overall pick next year as compensation if Suzuki does not sign with a major league team.
Which would mean it would make a lot more sense if he's going to pick him here to pick him 7th and 8th.
Exactly. And I also think it makes more sense for a team like Eric to gamble on him, because Eric does have 2 first-round picks this year, and he does have a pretty deep farm system. So if he does end up losing out on that extra first-round pick this year, it is not as big of a deal for him. And honestly, I could see some people who think the 2023 draft is a lot better, which personally I think it is better, deciding that, like, hey, I'll take the risk on Suzuki here because either I get a good major league ready player, or I get a first-round pick in next year's draft, which I do think is a better draft, which to them might be a win-win proposition. I do think maybe in the lottery portion of the draft, that might be a little too bold of a gamble to take. But I do think that the difference in talent between Suzuki and some of these guys who, while we do think this second tier kind of blends a little bit into the first tier, I do think that there is still a little bit of a drop off. I think at that point, maybe gambling on Suzuki's talent is better than, kind of taking a little bit of the stability of some of the guys left on the board. I feel pretty confident that Eric's going to take Suzuki for those reasons. And honestly, I don't really see an obvious landing spot for him otherwise, unless Eric decides he doesn't want Suzuki outright, in which case I could see him falling to EBO, or like maybe even Alex and Zach again at 9. But I don't know if he goes in the top 6. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as someone who's picking in the top 6, I don't, again, necessarily want to tip what I'm thinking too much. This was a lot easier last year when neither of us had picks in the first round. As of the time of recording, you ended up having a first rounder, but
yeah, well, I mean, you and I almost had 3, 6, 9, and 12. This like a couple weeks ago. That would have been
a minefield.
Third of the picks, yeah, that wouldn't have been pretty.
Imagine if Mel Kiper Jr. had the 9th overall pick in the NFL draft. How that would affect his reporting on it.
Oh, it would very much affect his reporting. I mean, thankfully, I'm a little more impartial here because I don't have any of these picks, and you at least may or may not still have the 12th pick on draft day. We'll get into that a bit later, but yeah, no, it definitely makes it difficult. Thankfully, we are an amateur production for a small league where there's no money on the line and nobody's going to lose their job. So it's not as big of a deal, but still a big deal in our minds.
It is. You sure no one's going to lose their job over this?
I don't know. We might fire you and find another GM to take your place, or maybe I'll find somebody else to co-host the podcast with me.
Uh-oh. Good luck having them edit all the episodes.
Yeah, touche.
I mean,
If I
if
had
anyone's
to
getting
edit all
replaced,
these
it's you.
if I had to edit all these episodes, we would have like 2 episodes up. So maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, we haven't talked about Jackson Joe, but we think Eric's going to take him at 8. He was taken 3rd overall by the Tigers in the real life draft, which was a little bit of a reach, but he is still a solid prospect. I think this is probably a reasonable landing spot for him, especially if Eric thinks he wants a pitcher.
I don't see why not. He wouldn't want a pitcher. I mean, he has Sixto and Hunter Green kind of at the top there of his farm, which is nice. I don't know if Ryan Pepio's there for too much longer. George Kirby's a nice arm, but he doesn't really have an arm below AA. He would be a good addition down there. He's a Tigers fan. I think it just makes a lot of sense for him to add a pitching prospect. I also say that Sanchez and Green have had injury issues, so it's not like they're even sure things. And kind of reminds me a little bit of your farm where there's a lot of solid hitting prospects. There's a couple top-notch pitching prospects, but having another depth starting pitcher is probably not a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Not that I even call him just depth, like he's like quality depth. So.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, moving on to number 9, we have Alex and Zach taking Colton Cowser, the Orioles outfielder, probably the best player available at this point. And yeah, this is going to be their third first rounder. They'll have taken, if our mock comes true, they'll have taken a catcher, an infielder, and an outfielder. So nice and balanced here. And I'm definitely high on Cowser. I said earlier that he could kind of crack into the top 6 group of guys here. Yeah, Alex is this team is a little bit unpredictable. They took Ha-Sung Kim with the 4th pick, which they traded for last year.
I don't think after taking that coming.
Yeah, after taking Max Meyer 3. They also took CJ Abrams 5th in 2020, which turned out to be a great pick. Yeah, so this, I'm the team that Max and Teo, who previously owned this team, took Nolan Gorman 4th in 2019. So this is their 4th year in a row with picks in the top 5. But yeah, you're the Orioles fan. Why don't you talk about Cowser?
Yeah, I really like Colton Cowser. He was definitely, somebody that I was looking at when I still owned 1st round picks. Although there are a ton of really great options here in the 1st round, but I kind of, my player comp for him is Michael Brantley. I think he has that type of upside, maybe a little less in the stolen base department than Brantley had kind of at the peak of his career, but like with the contact and on base skills, I think that he kind of reminds me a lot of Brantley. I think it'd be a solid pick here. I do think this is kind of where traditionally I have had kind of a start of a tier here of a couple guys, and we're going to see some more of those names coming later in this mock. I do think you could debate how these guys are ordered. I do think Cowser's a really good pick here. And I think they should be ecstatic if they get him at 9th. I think that would be a really good value. Although there are a number of guys here who I think would be a really good value for them this late into the 1st round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely some good value picks. And someone great could fall to them.
Well, let me ask you one more question before we switch over to EVO's picks here. Alex and Zach have 3 1st round picks, and they do have a 3rd round pick. They do have a very deep farm system. I think you and I have both agreed that they probably have a top half of the league farm system. And I'd say when I say top half, I think they're probably even more in that top kind of 3, but I haven't really dug deep into farm system rankings or anything. That's something we should do at some point. But do you think they trade one of these first round picks on draft day?
I hadn't thought about that, but I'm going to be bold and say that they do. I think it would make a lot of sense for this team to trade one of these picks.
I think so too. I don't think they need all the picks. I think they have a very strong farm, and I wonder if an opportunity is going to arise for them to maybe even trade into next year's draft, which they have 0 picks in. And I know Alex really prides himself in kind of, having first round picks each year. And, if he thinks next year might be a better draft, I could see a team like one of the teams with multiple first round picks next year wanting to, or maybe a team who sees a guy like a Kowser or somebody else at 9 available that really wants that player, go and get him. Also, I'd say if Seiya Suzuki slips to 9, I think you're going to have a whole lot of people who are trying to acquire that 9th overall pick.
That is true. I could absolutely see a mad dash to try and trade for this pick. Maybe I'd try to trade up. I don't know.
I'd also say if there is somebody who thinks that Suzuki is going to go to Eric and they really want Suzuki, I could see them trying to trade for 6.
Yeah, no, that's true too.
And I don't think Alex is opposed to moving these picks because he has floated 5, 6, and 9 in trade talks since he's acquired 6 and 9. So we'll see. I don't know if he's definitively going to trade them. I think if he ends up with Henry Davis, Brady House, and Colton Kowser, like he's easily one of the winners of this draft. But we'll see. Maybe he's able to extract more value by trading one of those picks. Yeah,
no, there's really a lot of these picks that could be moving, especially Alex and Zach's. 2 lottery picks this year, 2 lottery picks last year, and then number 5 in 2020, number 4 in 2019. They always... I could really see them trying to trade back into next year's draft.
I think that's kind of the logical answer, is that they probably should. They also, while we're on the topic of their future drafts, they don't have a first round pick or a second round pick in 2025, no second round pick in 2024. So over the next 3 drafts, they only have 1 combined first and second round pick, and that's their 2024 first round pick. They do have 2 firsts and 2 seconds in 2026, courtesy of me and the Brandon Woodruff deal. But I think we're right. I think it would behoove them to move into later drafts, kind of redistribute the assets, kind of like EBO is trying to do right now.
Behoove.
Yeah, behoove.
Yeah, great job getting that word onto the podcast.
But speaking I don't even know why I said that. It just kind of came out. I was just, I wasn't even thinking about it. Just slipped. I like it. I'm going to try to use the word behoove more often.
All right. Try and slip it into the podcast. We should each give each other a word before we record every time and try and get the other person to slip that word into the podcast.
Wait, that's actually genius. We should also do that with like a player. Like we should each name a random player and be like, you somehow need to work this player into the podcast.
Man.
Could you imagine
if I made you slip the word crouton into a podcast?
Word crouton. You're like, my God.
God, if the Marlins prospects are a salad, then Khalil Watson is the croutons.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Maybe
I will take no questions.
No questions. Yeah. Just no context. We have to try to get everybody to decipher that. Oh man.
Anyway, EBO's got 2 straight picks here. With the first one, we have them taking Benny Montgomery, outfielder for the Rockies. He'd be a great get here. He'd actually be the second Rockies outfielder taken by this team in the past 2 drafts. So there's maybe a pattern forming, but he'd also just be the best player available, perhaps. And with their second pick, we have them taking Harry Ford, the catcher for the Mariners. Maybe not the best player available at this point, but I could see them. They currently have 0 catchers in their entire organization. He'd be a good pick here and not like a huge reach or anything.
Yeah. No, I think that Benny Montgomery would be a really good pick for them. They, really had good experience last year taking another Rockies outfielder in Zach Veen, as you mentioned. I know a lot of people seem to think that Benny Montgomery arguably is the highest upside of anybody in this draft from a fantasy perspective, just because he's going to play in cores. But we also know how the Rockies develop players. Either way, I think he's very worthy of a pick here. I think there's a lot of people who kind of think he's right at the same level as Colton Cowser. And they're kind of like interchangeable. I often kind of think about them together as a pair. So, I think he'd be a good pick there. I think Harry Ford would also be a really good pick. He's been getting a lot of hype. I also kind of have him in that tier with Cowser and Montgomery. I think these would just be 2 very solid picks. EVO also is not rostering a catcher currently, and they do need a long-term catcher.
They certainly do. Maybe Harry Ford is that guy.
Maybe he is. I think it'll be interesting to see. I also could see them trading one of these picks away. EBO still has 6 picks. They have a very good farm system. If, some wacky offer comes around, with them, it's just like, you never know. Like they could trade away one of these 2nd-round picks and find room for the other 5 prospects, or next thing you know, they could trade both of their 1st-round picks to somebody else, and I wouldn't be surprised. So whatever their strategy is, I don't necessarily think they are making both of these picks.
Yeah, I think they're going to need to make a trade of some sort, and it remains to be seen what that'll be. But they have so many picks this year and next year. I know they've been in talks about trading multiple seconds, at least in next year's draft. But yeah, it would not shock me if they made one or neither of these picks.
Yeah, and I think that that's also what makes it a little difficult for them, is that it's not like Alex and Zach, for example, where we're like, hey, they don't have any picks in the 2023 draft. Maybe it's logical for them to trade one of them back. Like EBO has 2 firsts, 5 seconds, and 4 thirds next year. So that's 11 picks. That's almost a third of the draft next year. And then they have 7 picks a year after, 1 first, 3 seconds, and 3 thirds. And then in 2025, they have 3 firsts, 3 seconds, and a third. So, that's just bonkers. And I think it probably means they're just going to have to start trading some of these picks for major league players. So if somebody's willing to sell major league players during the draft, I think that might be EBO's best avenue. If not, they need to find another way to consolidate this value. I will say, though, having 17 plus 7, 24 plus 7, having 31 picks between the next 4 drafts is not the worst problem to have. As somebody who has 3 picks between the next 4 drafts, and all of them are in the 3rd round this year, I kind of envy them a little bit. So we'll see what happens. But there is one more 1st-round pick to be made, and that belongs to you. And we are mocking that you take Cincinnati Reds shortstop Matt McLain. I think this is a logical pick for you simply because he is a Cincinnati Red, but also because I think he's a really good prospect. I don't think he's getting as much hype as the top 4 shortstop prospects, but I do think he's a very good player outright. He's a college bat, so I think he could rise relatively quickly. And he would sure look nice kind of next to Volpe, and assuming this mock goes as it does, Khalil Watson as infielders kind of in the lower end of your farm system. What are your thoughts on Matt McLain? Or is there anything you really want to add, given that you do own this pick and you might not want to reveal too much?
Yeah. Again, I'm not going to reveal too much. I think Matt McLain's a great prospect. I think he's definitely in this tier of guys. There's definitely a bunch of them right in this area, such as Matt McLean, Sal Frelick, Harry Ford, Trey Sweeney, Sam Bachman, bunch of guys. And I think mocking the Cincinnati Reds player to me gives away the least amount of new information to people who might want to, I don't know, make a trade to trade for 11.
That's very fair. And I mean, speaking of trading 11, I wouldn't be surprised if you trade 12. I know you've had trade talks for 12. And I think with the farm system as deep as you have, I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to make the pick at 12. Now, I think you will make a pick at 3 because I think you'll be able to get a top flight guy that you probably won't be able to get otherwise. But I think you have the luxury of trading 12. Now, what you trade 12 for, I don't know. But if I had to bet on one of these first 12 picks moving, I would bet on 12 being the pick that moves.
Interesting. You think 12 is the most likely to be moved?
I think so, but if you ask me that question again in 5 minutes, maybe my opinions change admittedly. But yeah, I think you find a way to move that pick.
Well, we shall see. It certainly is on the block. I would certainly consider offers for 12, because I do have a lot of picks coming up, and I really don't have very many droppable prospects. It's tough to find room for these guys. We've only got 20.
I mean, just saying, if you do want to make a pick at 12 and then drop Adley Rutschman, I would not be mad.
Yeah, that's I'll have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, no, I'd appreciate that. It's better than you just saying outright no. So
yeah,
progress.
All right. I'm getting back to you, and the answer is no.
Well, I'm replacing you as my co-host. So. Remember that month where we were every time something would happen, we'd be like, yeah, we're kicking you out of M-SABR camp.
I remember that. That was a running joke in 2019 or something.
20, yeah. It was right when I joined M-SABR. I remember that was the running joke. And I was like, Jesus, how incompetent is this guy?
Yeah, 2018 it must have been, yeah. But yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Good times.
It was a fun time. But all right, so we've gone through our mock. Just to recap it one more time before we get into some more questions about this draft. We have Yuki taking Marcelo Meyer at 1, Andrew taking Jack Leiter at 2, you taking Khalil Watson at 3, Greg Daniel and Alex taking Jordan Lawler at 4, Alex and Zach taking Henry Davis at 5, Alex and Zach taking Brady House at 6, Eric taking Saya Suzuki at 7, Eric taking Jackson Jobe at 8, Alex and Zach taking Colton Cowser at 9, EBO taking Benny Montgomery at 10, EBO taking Harry Ford at 11, and you taking Matt McLean at 12. And we've also mentioned Sal Frelick and Trey Sweeney as names that could potentially sneak into the first round. But let me ask you a few questions here. Let's first start with, we've listed 12 names that are going to be drafted in the first round. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that those are the 12 names that will actually be drafted in the first round?
I'm going to say a 4. I think I would say the first, 10 or so are basically locks to go somewhere in the first round. But really, it could be any combination for the final 2 picks, or maybe we see someone super off board going 7th, or I don't know. I just think it's pretty unlikely that we win a perfect 12 for 12.
I think so too. As much as I'd like to think we do, I'm going to say a 4 as well. And I think you're right. I think the top 10 are probably set. I feel pretty confident about the 11th. also being in the first round. But I think you're right. Somebody's going to surprise us. Somebody's going to be higher in South Relic or Trey Sweeney or Jay Allen or some other name I'm not naming. And they're going to sneak into the first round as well. Or maybe we get some news about Saya Suzuki in between now and recording that makes us believe that he is not going to come out and play in the majors this year, in which case he would come off the board, and that would really throw a wrench into our mock draft.
Hit throw a wrench into the draft in general.
A wrench into the draft in general. Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of Trey Sweeney, I think so he's a guy who's really high on Fantrax, but not listed in too many other places. Do you think he goes in the first round? I think the most likely landing spot would be Eric at 8, but I don't really see any other pick where he makes sense.
Yeah, I could see him going in the first round. I could also see EBO taking him over maybe somebody like Harry Ford if they don't really want to draft a catcher. Or maybe even Alex and Zach sneaking him in at 9.
I don't know about them. I'm not sure about that, but
yeah, but I mean, I don't think either of us thought they were going to take Ha-Seong Kim last year at 4.
That's true.
So
Kim was off the board in a different way than Sweeney is.
Yeah, that's also true. I mean, if somebody's kind of closely following like the a Fantrax list or one of these other sites, I could see Sweeney sneaking up into the first round. But I like to think enough of us are kind of self-scouting where we might have a little different opinions. But who knows? All it takes is one person to be reasonably high in that player, and the expectation that that player is not going to be around at their next pick for them to pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, while we're on the topic of Alex and Zach, over under 2.5 picks that they make in the first round.
I'm going to take the under. I'm going to say that they will. They're more likely to have 2 picks than they are to have 3 picks.
All right. I'm going to keep track of this so we can review this on our next podcast. But you take the under. I'm going to take. This is a tough one. I'm going to take the over. I'm going to take the under. I think they trade 9. I don't know who they trade 9 to or how that works out, but I think they trade
9. Interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's a surprise that happens on draft day more than anything else. I lied. I'm going to take the over. Because I'm going to take the under on another team that I'm going to ask here. EBO over under 1.5 picks.
I will take the over. I'm going to say they'll end up keeping both of theirs.
I'm going to take the under. I trust Zane's ability to make some crazy trade more than I trust Alex and Zach's ability to make some crazy trade. And I think that they're not going to have a first round pick when it's all said and done. I think it would be too logical for Alex and Zach to be like, hey, we're going to try and trade for 2023 first by getting rid of one of our 2022 first. I think the less logical thing is for EBO to make some crazy trade over the weekend. So let's go with that.
Right.
You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I'm going to answer it. You over under 1.5 trades.
I'm going to not answer, but why don't you answer?
Sorry, 1.5 picks. You're not going to answer. I'm going to say, I'm going to take the under. I think you trade 12. So I think you're only going to make 1 first round pick, and I think it's going to be at 3.
Well, you can be the reason that I don't have 12 anymore.
I could. We'll see if that one works out. Over under the number of catchers taken in the first round, 1.5.
I'm going to say over. I think Harry Ford ends up going 11 to EBO.
I'm also going to take the over. I also think Harry Ford makes the first round.
If EBO doesn't have 2 picks, then I think it may be a little more unlikely.
That's fair, but we also don't know who's going to trade into that first round who might want to take Harry Ford.
That's true.
Shortstops over under 4.5.
Oh, that's interesting. So basically that's asking, will Matt McLean be taken in the first round?
Might be.
I guess I'll say the over.
Well, we did mock 5, so that would make sense. I'm going to go the under because I think Matt McLean goes at like 13 or 14. I don't know if he's locked to go at 12. Starting pitchers over under 1.5 in the first round.
I am going to take the over. I think Job goes, and I think he goes definitely in the top 10.
Yeah. I also think Job's going to go. I wouldn't be totally surprised if he slips to EBO if Eric wants to take a hitter instead of Job, in which case I don't think Alex and Zach take him at 9. I think EBO would take Job at 10 or 11 for the Tigers fandom. But I'd say the over on that as well. Now, last over under I have off the top of my head, over under the number of trades in the first round. I'm going to set this at 2, so you could say push if you want to, but I feel like 2.5 or 1.5 would create too easy of an answer.
2 trades. I'm going to say over. I think there's a lot working under the scenes. I'm going to say there's going to be 3 or more trades.
Interesting. I'm gonna say push. The problem is these trades are big commitments. Now, I think we might be more likely to see trades in previous years because there are multiple teams that own multiple first-round picks. So, like, while I don't see, like, Yuki or Andrew or Greg, Daniel, and Alex necessarily trading their picks because they only have 1 and they are 1, 2, and 4, everybody else owns multiple first-round picks. And everybody else has expressed interest in moving those first-round picks to varying degrees, some more than others. But I do think those trades are a little harder to execute. Mm-hmm. And I don't know necessarily what some of these teams are going to be looking for some of those picks. So I'm going to say push. I'm going to be a little conservative there. But I hope you're right. I hope that I'm proven wrong there. And that
I wouldn't be surprised if Eric had something completely unexpected up his sleeve.
I don't know. I think Eric's more likely to move either 21 or one of his prospects that he is to move 7 or 8.
That's fair, but you never know.
You never know, but I also think this draft's going to lay out pretty nicely for him to get a couple good talents at 7 and 8. And I also think that his price for 7 and 8 is pretty high. Mm-hmm. I'd say almost too high for those picks to be traded. And I would say that if I do think picks are going to be traded, I'd say it's more likely to be in that 9 to 12 range.
Yeah, I guess last year's draft shaped up very nicely for him. Although I don't believe Nick Gonzalez had that great a year, if I'm remembering right. No, he did. I'm wrong.
Yeah. No,
I just haven't heard much about him since the draft.
Right. No, Gonzalez has had a very nice year. Okay. He has flown under the radar. Are there any other big storylines we want to talk about here with the first round or with the draft as a whole?
So I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about was international amateur prospects. I know last year was the first time we didn't get any first rounders out of it. There were no Victor Mesa, or
other Mesa.
I guess
he didn't go in the first round, but I feel like other Mesa is worth mentioning.
But yeah, in 2020, Jason Dominguez went 10th. In 2019, of course, Victor Mesa went 9th. But every year, there's always a couple guys that go earlier than you expect them to. Like in 2020, I was expecting Eric Pena to be still on the board much later in that third round, even for my 36th pick. And then in 2021, we saw Christian Hernandez and William Diaz go back to back at 16, 17, which really surprised me. That was a lot earlier than I was expecting those guys to go. And yeah, I think, are there any international names that stand out for you that you could potentially see going kind of early this year?
No, there's not a ton of names that stand out to me. And maybe part of it is I haven't done as much research into some of these names, but I also think part of it is the signing periods were all kind of thrown off of COVID. And I also think that with COVID, we've had fewer opportunities to maybe see some of these players with the last 2020 season. And I wonder if that's going to affect who gets drafted. I could see something similar to last year where there's the one Asian player who came out who was like a really big name and goes in the first round. So last year was Ha-Sung Kim. This year it could be Saya Suzuki. And then I think in the second round, maybe there's a player or two that kind of sneaks in there, like Christian Hernandez, Wilman Diaz, and Yoelqui Cespedes did last year, as well as Carlos Camarans. There was like 4 of them last year. Damn. But I don't think it's a very high number. I think it's probably lower compared to previous years. That being said, I admittedly need to do a little more research on these guys. Maybe there are some guys that I'm missing, but at first glance, I don't think there's going to be a ton this year.
Yeah, there are a lot of guys who aren't quite eligible yet. For example, Roderick Arias, who's maybe the top guy. He is expected to sign on January 15th. And I believe there's something, January 15th is a deadline of some sort. I'm looking at a couple other guys.
Juan Soto's little brother, I think, is not going to sign until June.
Right. No, exactly. He's projected to go to the Mets. Christian Vaquero from Cuba. He's a top guy. He's linked with the Cubs, and also maybe the Nationals. But yeah, a lot of these top guys haven't signed. We kind of missed a year with that. So it'll be really interesting to see if there is anyone worth taking. The only person who I know is Gabriel Gonzalez, who signed with the Mariners this past March. And he in the Dominican Summer League hit decently well. He's the only name that's even on my radar currently.
Yeah, he was on kind of my radar too. I just, he might literally be the only one. I don't think there's a ton, and I think that that's all right. I mean, there's not necessarily the highest hit rate on some of these international guys where we've like drafted them in the past. Some of these guys really pan out. Some of them are just ginormous flops. And I think that there is inherently a little more risk in some of these guys. And some people in this league have a little more tolerance for that risk. A lot of times I feel like with these international guys, we tend to pick them up off of free agency once they show a little bit more at these lower levels in the minor leagues. Like, for example, I picked up Reginald Preciado kind of after he showed off. Once he was actually signed with the Cubs and he wasn't drafted in one of our drafts, and now he's like a top 100 prospect type guy. So I feel like you might have some teams who just kind of wait more for those types of guys. Eric Heriberto Hernandez is another good example of that. And the only reason I bring that up is because there's never a bad time to mention Heriberto Hernandez. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. But yeah, I'm not expecting a ton of those guys.
Right. Absolutely.
But yeah, is there anything else we wanted to discuss draft wise here? I'm looking through my list quickly. I want to ask you one more question because I'm kind of interested to see if you think that this is a possibility. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it is that none of the first round picks were traded? That all of the trades of the first round picks over the past like few months is like kind of settled the deck per se?
I'm going to say a 3. I think, I'll even go 2. I think there's got to be something. I would be very surprised if nothing moved, just with the amount of people who have multiple picks that probably would be better served getting rid of one of them.
I'm going to say 3 only because I think some of these teams might look more to move their second round or third round picks as opposed to moving those first round picks. But I don't really know. I think we see at least one trade. I'm curious if I don't know if we have this off the top of our heads. We could search this up. Last year's draft, there was on the day of the draft, the Willie Adames Jorge Polanco trade went down, but I believe that was right before the draft started, because Connor traded his 2021 first in that trade. So if you want to call it a draft day trade, then like we had 2 because I acquired the 12th pick last year from EBO for what ended up being the 10th pick this year, which ironically has bounced around quite a bit, including back to me. And then EBO has now gotten it back. But maybe we see something similar this year where 2 firsts are traded. I certainly didn't see Connor trading 4 at the last second last year, so maybe something bonkers like that happens again.
Yeah, I was the runner-up for that trade. I seem to be the runner-up for a lot of trades with Alex.
You do. You do.
But yeah, so I saw that coming. But yeah, that's there's always something brewing. And you really never know with this league. That's what I've learned.
You really never do know with this league. Yeah. I mean, I have just this league it never ceases to blow my mind. Like I swear there's probably like 20 trades this year where they just like came out of nowhere, and I can tell you where I was where that trade happened because it's just so jarring to me that trade happened. So you never know.
You never know.
But yeah, if that's it, see you next time after the draft. And for our second draft episode, and I will say, we are going to have a third draft episode after next week's second draft episode. Make sure to tune in for that. That's going to be a very special draft episode.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah, stay tuned.
This podcast is good.